What's up everybody, it's Kazra again, and today we're going to be talking about decision-making control structures. Control structures are basically the first time where we see Java to really be a high-level programming language. These control structures give us a flow within our program, and give us a lot of flexibility as a programmer. The computer is basically able to do certain things based on whether certain outcomes or events are true or not. And we're going to take a look at the most fundamental control structure, and that is the if statement. I guarantee you that this if statement is in any programming language. And the logic of it basically reads like this. If something is true, then this. So we said in our last video that a Boolean expression holds a true or a false value. So basically the computer is going to read, if something is true, then do this. It's formatted again with our opening and closing parentheses and our opening and closing braces. And we're going to take a really quick look at that right here in our Eclipse IDE. And we're going to write a simple program that goes like this. And we're going to format our if statement again with our opening and closing parentheses and our opening and closing braces. We're going to say, if 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, then system.out.println, in quotes, 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. And what it's going to do is the computer is going to read the if statement, and basically it's going to say, if this is true, then do this. And it's going to see that 1 plus 1 is in fact equal to true, and therefore it's going to go inside this if statement and it's going to do whatever's in the if statement. In this case, we put a print statement. And so we're going to go ahead and run our program. And like we see here, it says that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. Our next instance of a control structure is the if-else statement. And this basically says this. If something is true, then do this. Otherwise, do this. And else is basically the otherwise key. It says you can have a bunch of if statements that are checking and doing a bunch of things, but if none of them are true, then your computer is automatically going to go to that else statement. So we're going to take a really quick example of that again with a similar program. And it's going to read like this. We're going to change this if statement to say 3, and we're going to change this to 3. And then we're going to put an else statement under it with our opening and closing braces. And we're going to say system.out.println, in quotes, incorrect. 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. And basically what it's going to do is the computer is going to read through this if statement, and it's going to see that, oh, 1 plus 1 is not equal to 3, so it's going to disregard that if statement, and it's not going to be read. And it's going to go to this else statement, and it's going to say, incorrect, 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. So let's see how that runs. So when we run that, it says, incorrect, 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, because it saw that that if statement was not correct, and it saw that there was an else statement, so it automatically went to that. Our next example of a control structure is the nested if, and I'm not going to show an example of it, but it's super important to think of it logically. It basically says, if Boolean expression 1, then Boolean expression 2, then statements. Or sorry, if Boolean expression 1 and Boolean expression 2, then statements. And you see this example is exactly the same as this example. This basically says, if Boolean expression 1 and Boolean expression 2, and we have those double ampersand ands, which is a logical operator that we're going to go over later, then do this. And these are super important to understand, and it's obviously called a nested if statement because that second if statement is nested inside that first one. So, now we're going to talk about the else if statement. And we already talked about our if statements and our else statements, but here's our else if statement. It basically says, if something, then do this. Else if, do this. Else if, do that. Else this. And really, you really don't need to use else ifs. They're not crucial to use. It's not necessary to use, but it's more programmatically correct to use else if statements rather than just a bunch of lined up if statements. And also it looks better too. So we're going to take another example. And what we're going to do is we're going to delete all this stuff, and we're going to really quickly set a string. We're going to name it grade, and we're going to set that equal to A. And this example is basically going to use a bunch of if and else statements. So, if grade And we have to use this dot equals method because we're comparing strings. If we were comparing ints, then we could just use two equals signs. So we're going to say, if grade dot equals a, system dot out dot println, your student's a smarty. And here we're going to implement our else if statement. So it's just else space if with our parentheses for our statements, our Boolean expression. If grade dot equals, in quotes, b. And what we can do here is we can even put the equals ignore case method, but it's really not necessary. But that's just to show more items. So else if grade dot equals b, system dot out dot println, your student is smart, but not the best. We're going to do the same thing with the letter C. We're just going to write satisfactory. I don't care if I spelled that wrong. And we're going to put our else statement because this is getting kind of repetitive. I think you understand the logic behind it. Your student needs some work. So I typed that up really quickly, and if you want to pause the video to catch up, go ahead and do so. But this is just an example just to show how these if statements and else if statements work. So basically what we did is we set a string called grade equal to a, and we're actually going to change that to C right now just to show how the logic works. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and run this programming and see what it does. And so it prints satisfactory. And that's because the computer reads through these if statements, and it starts with this one, and it says if grade dot equals a, and it doesn't equal a, so it goes to the next else if statement, if grade dot equals b, and it doesn't, and then it goes to the next one, and it goes if grade dot equals c, and it sees that that's true, so it goes inside that if statement and does whatever's inside. In this case, again, it's a print statement that says satisfactory. If we were to change this to, say, f, and run the program, it would say your student needs some work. If we change this to A, for example, and run it, obviously you know what it's going to do. It's going to say your student's a smarty. And so this was basically an example that showed how these if and else if statements work. Now we're going to talk about some really important operators that are crucial in our if statement. So the first set of operators that we're going to talk about are the relational operators. And these are basically used in our if statements and are used to relate different items together. So our first one is obviously our equals to method. And this says if y is equal to 100, if x is equal to 7, if g is equal to 5. And this is marked by two equal signs. And the thing you want to understand is there's a huge difference between two equal sign and one equal sign. One equal sign is used in declaring a variable, and we looked at that in the last video. So we could say int I is equal with one equal sign to 5. But in this case, with our relational operators, this is how we check if things are true, or in this case, equal to each other. And our second one is obviously our not equals to operator, and this is signified by the exclamation point in Java, which means not. And this basically says if x doesn't equal 100, or if y doesn't equal 50, or if g doesn't equal 25. And the next couple ones are pretty self-explanatory, but I'm going to go over them anyways. They're basically less than or greater than. And then less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to. And this basically says if age is less than 18, or grade is greater than 90, then do this. Or if grade is less than or equal to 80, then print B, or lower than B. Whatever. What have you. But these are super important, and they're going to be things that are going to come up definitely on the AP subset, and they're things that you definitely want to know when working with if statements, because this is how you compare different items. And the next set of operators are the logical operators. And this, I guarantee you, is on the AP test. So the first one is the not. And this basically, again, means not. So if not found or whatever. But the next two, number 2 and 3, are super important to understand. And those are the and the or functions. And is signified by shift 7, and those are ampersand ands. And it basically says, if my example here says, if age is greater than 18 and cholesterol is less than 200, then do this. So we look at here. Both sides of the and statement have to be true for this if statement to be read and to be true. So if our age was greater than 18, but our cholesterol wasn't less than 200, then this would not be true, because both statements have to be true for that and. But then, on the other hand, looking at our or statement, we see that in our example, if grade is less than 65 or age is equal to 10, then do this. In this case, only one side of the or statement has to be true. I think if you're confused about what these things are, I think they're called pipelines or pipes or whatever, and you can find those above your enter key. And again, only one of the sides of the or statement has to be true, and we can take a look at an example of those if we look at these true-false tables. And I made one true-false table for an and one true-false statement for an or. And this is very logical, but again, it's something that's super important to take into consideration. And it basically says if you have one true and you have another true, that'll print true, because both sides of the and statement need to be true. But if you have one true and one false, then it's going to be false. And you see that with all of these, because if there's a false, or if something isn't true, then it's not going to read that if statement. On the other hand, if you have an or, as long as you have one true, then that if statement will print true. So if you have a false and a true, it'll print true. If you have a true and a true, obviously a true. But if you have a false and a false, it'll print false. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at an example of everything that we covered in this video. So what we're going to do now is take a look at an example that incorporates everything that we talked about in this video. And the first thing we're going to do is import a class. So as a Java programmer, we're able to access different packages and classes that have been pre-written for us to be able to use. And the format of an import statement is as follows. You have your package name, your subpackage name, and your class name. And we're going to be using the scanner class. And what the scanner class allows us to do is take input from a user. So what we're going to do is create a scanner object. We're going to call it scanner, referencing the class. And we're going to call it my scanner. You can call it whatever you want. We're going to say new scanner. And we're going to say system.in. And that is calling our input stream. And we're going to create a couple of variables. One is going to be string name. The next is going to be int age. And the next is going to be int height. So what we're going to do is we're going to say system.out.println hello friend, what is your name? And from here, we're going to set our name equal to my scanner, which is referencing our scanner object that we created, .next, and because it's a string, we're using the next line function. If it was an int, we would put next int. If it was a double, we would put next double. If it was a float, we would put next float. But for this case, we're going to put next line. I don't know why it's not next string, but I'm not going to argue with the people who wrote this class. And what's going to happen here is it's going to print what is your name, and it's going to leave space for us to input something. And whatever we input and press enter is going to set to this variable name. So now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to be accessing this age object that we created, and we're going to say okay, and we're going to say plus name, because the name should have already been, or the input should have already been assigned to this name object. And we're going to say okay name, how old are you? And again, we're going to do the same thing with our age. We're going to say age is equal to my scanner dot next, and because it's an integer, we're doing next int. And we're going to do the same thing with our age, or sorry, our height. So what is your height? And we're going to again set height equal to myscanner.next int. Okay, so what we basically did here is created 3 objects, 1 string and 2 ints, and use the scanner class to assign values based on the input to those variables. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to set a couple if statements. And we're going to say if age is less than 18 and height is less than 5, we'll just say 5 feet. System.out.println, you're still a baby. Else if age is greater than 18 and height is greater than 5, system.out.println, how's the adult life? Else if age is equal to 50 or height is equal to 6, system.out.println, are you 50 or are you tall? And just one last else statement that's going to say system.out.println senior citizen. So this is a very, very text-based thing, but we're going to go ahead and run this and see how it works. So again, whoops, it's going to say, hello friend, what is your name? And we're going to set our name equal to peervids. Okay, peervids, and the spacing is weird because I didn't put any quotes to space things out, but it doesn't even matter. So it says, okay, peervids, how old are you? And we're going to say 2. So what is your height? And we'll say 4. You're still a baby. And peervids is a baby, but we're going to go ahead and run this again to show some different outcomes. Hello friend, what is your name? Bob. Okay, Bob, how old are you? We'll say 49. So what is your height? We'll say 7. How's the adult life? Okay, and that basically kind of concludes our program, our little small program that we wrote. But we basically, in this video, talked about if statements, else if statements, and else statements. We talked about the scanner class for a little bit, and also got to learn some relational and logical operators that are super important when writing these control structures. I hope you enjoyed this video. In the next video, we're going to be talking about iteration control structures. I hope to see you then. Thank you.